If everyone would please rise. At this time, I would ask Councilman Michael Stock to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us all together here tonight safely. Thank you for getting us through the weekend safely with all the people we had in town, and direct us to the way that we need to make for this city. Amen.
At this time, we will be convening a public hearing before the meeting actually continues to establish the tax levy for the fiscal year 2017-18 beginning April 1st, 2017. It's at this time that we take public comments, so if there's anyone here who would like to make a public comment regarding the tax levy, now would be the time. Seeing no comments, we will close the public hearing and continue with the council meeting with roll call.
Stock,
Here.
Young,
Here.
Meadows,
Here.
Beach,
Here.
Hurt,
Here.
Carter,
Here.
Venable,
Here.
Dorman.
Here. Hearing of citizens' comments. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to make a comment at this time, we invite you to come forward to the microphone. Doesn't look like we have anyone who would like to make a comment this evening, so we'll move along to approval of the minutes of the August 7th, 2017 council meeting, and you've had those in your packet to look over. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, they will stand as presented. Consent items, we have none this evening. Presentation of accounts and claims. Teresa, when you're ready.
Ordinance appropriating money. Be it ordained by the council of the city of Boonville as follows. Section 1, for the purpose of paying salaries and various accounts against the city of Boonville which have been allowed by the council at the regular meeting thereof on August 22nd, 2017, the sum of $389,156.45. General fund, $219,681.79. Sanitation, $6,474.68. CIP tax, $12,788.60. Waterworks, $14,916.49. Capital projects, $0.00. Wastewater, $34,511.80. Tourism, $4,391.82. Gaming, $13,072.12. Parks and Water, $83,319.15. Section 2. The accountant is hereby authorized and instructed to draw checks on the respective city bank accounts in favor of the persons whose salaries and accounts have been allowed as above, amounting to $389,156.45, being the total amount of money above appropriated. Section 3. This ordinance shall take effect and be enforced from it after its passage. First reading on August 22nd, 2017. Read for the second time this 22nd day of August 2017. Since a copy was made available prior to the meeting.
Second reading, title only.
Ordinance appropriating money.
Mayor, make a motion this be approved.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Thank you, Susan. Questions? Roll call.
Stock,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Beach,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Venable,
Yes.
Dorman. Yes.
Okay. On to unfinished business, item A, fiscal year 2016-17 audit presentation by Mr. Jeff Chitwood of Girding, Cordy & Chitwood. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for having me here today. I've been here the past several years. I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm going to kind of go over the audit report with you, go over the highlights. As usual, if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to let me know at any time. Our office is downtown, just south of downtown, so if you have any questions after the meeting, please feel free to let us know. I want to start kind of by going over the audit report. The audit opinion is pages 1 through 3. Once again, we got an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion you could get from an audit. No major issues that would cause us to qualify as the opinion. pages 4 through 12 is the management's discussion and analysis. And as I mentioned before, if you're going to kind of get into the details of what you're going to read in this audit report, which is fairly lengthy, that is a good thing to read. It's done by management, kind of summarizes what has been done over the year, things to look for in the actual audit report itself that's behind those pages. Just gives a real good summary of how the city performed this year compared to last year and how things are looking going forward. The government-wide financial statements start on page 13, and those are broken out between governmental and enterprise funds or business-type funds. Your governmental funds are your general fund, street fund, things like that. Your enterprise fund, water, sewer, sanitation. Your enterprise funds are run like a business. You're charging for services from your customers, your city people. And then you're also spending money to make improvements in those areas as well. The general funds are your taxes, your tax money, franchise, sales tax, property taxes, those type of things. And then improvements, tourism, and gaming, things like that. I did want to point out on page 16 this year is the balance sheet of the governmental funds. And if you look down at the bottom, total fund equity, kind of lists over the years your net income and those funds added up over the years. And you can see the total for the governmental fund is $11.2 million. And if you flip over to page 18, the total expenditures for the year were 11.7. So that's almost 100%. It's a 96% fund equity, which is excellent. The city's in good financial standing as far as the governmental funds goes. It's a testament to you as a council, to Earl leading the city as far as how things are accounted for, how money is spent. And I know the city has done a lot of things over the last couple of years as far as using city employees to do some work that could have been contracted out, which has saved the city quite a bit of money. So I did want to point that out this year. 96% is an excellent equity ratio to expenses to have in your governmental funds, and that's really good. There were no new accounting issues this year that required us to put anything new in the audit report. If you remember the past couple of years, we had a new pension standard. It's still in there. The city still has a net pension asset from their retirement funds with loggers, loggers does a calculation, kind of gives the numbers to the city, and we include that in the audit report itself. The net pension asset is smaller than it has been in the last couple of years. That's nothing the city has done. That calculation done by loggers does require a lot of actuarial assumptions, and those can fluctuate quite a bit from year to year. And what we've seen in the last couple of years is that pension asset started kind of high, or was actually a liability, and it's actually decreased, or the net pension asset has, or the liability has grown, basically due to the assumptions by actuaries from loggers. So no huge change as far as what the city has done at all, or nothing incorrect, anything like that. But if you do look and compare this year to last year, that net pension asset has gone down by a little bit. The footnotes are there to look at, and those kind of give details of the funds themselves, your debt, your fixed assets, your cash, what makes those up. No major issues this year. You did have some new debt in your park stormwater sales tax fund, and that's detailed there, $3 million of new debt there, which is being used for capital improvements, as you well know. There's some required supplementary information back there dealing with the pension, and then also some more detailed information on your non-major governmental funds, your capital projects fund, tourism, and capital improvement sales tax fund. So those are all back there to look at, some budget comparisons, things like that. And the final thing in the audit report is the internal control report. If we were to have any major issues, what are called significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, we would include those there in that report. As we've gone over the last couple of years, the city's done a good job of segregating duties. Made some changes 2 or 3 years ago. We did have that segregation of duties problem 2 or 3 years ago, and there's been changes made to allow us not to include that in the audit report, which is very good. And I think I mentioned last year, for the city the size of Boonville, it's pretty common, almost almost always has that segregation of duties issue. But the city's done a good job of resolving that, so we do not have to include it in as a significant deficiency. So we had no significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses again this year. The city did not require an A-133 or single audit this year. Did not spend more than $750,000 of federal money, which the last few years we've had to do that extra kind of audit, but was not required in 2016-17. And the last piece I wanted to mention is the audit communication letter. It's a separate report from the actual audit report itself. And if there were any small issues that we didn't consider significant or material, we would put that in that letter. And as you can look through there, no small issues that we wanted to include even in that. So the city does a great job. I did want to thank Earl and Kim and Teresa, department heads, ML. Those guys all help out quite a bit getting the audit done. Put in a lot of hard work before we get there to do the audit, and then a lot of hard work afterwards. And they do a great job. As I mentioned, the city's in really good financial shape from what we've seen here during our 2017 audit. Do you have any questions for me?
We appreciate Jeff also. We do spend some time when something new comes up, asking him questions, bouncing things off, and doing trial balloons so that we kind of both on the same page before we get a lot of paper trail going that we wish we had. So.
Yeah, I think the things we've discussed throughout the year are great things to do, and how that's been accounted for. When we do discuss it beforehand, it does make the audit go smoothly. So we encourage that, and we're happy to do that as a service to the city.
Any questions from the council? I'd say it's very good news.
Yes.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Item B, second reading of bill number 2017-025, establishing the tax levy for fiscal year 17-18.
An ordinance of the City of Boonville, Missouri, establishing the rate of taxes to be levied on all property subject to taxes in the City of Boonville, Missouri for the fiscal year beginning April 1st, 2017.
Morris,
Make a motion this be approved.
do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ned. Questions or comments?
A couple of observations. If you happen to look at the public hearing ad, which you may or may not have done, you'll see our total valuation for the city eked out I guess a 0.7% increase this year. Our levy is virtually the same as it was last year, 70.6 versus 70.46. And our ceiling without a vote is 73.66. One thing, keep those numbers in mind, because we're going to hit on that a little bit later on when we talk about some other items. Just remember the 70, 73 number versus what we'll talk about then. So that's all.
Okay. Any further questions? Roll call.
Stock,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Beach,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Venable,
Yes.
Dorman.
Yes.
Item C, consider resolution R 2017-08, authorize reimbursement of expenses relative to the planned tax-exempt financing for the soccer project.
A resolution to declare the official intent of the City of Boonville, Missouri, whereas the City of Boonville, Missouri, the city, intends to finance the costs to acquire, construct, extend, improve, and equip the city's soccer complex, including without limitation the cost to construct and equip new soccer fields and practice facilities, the project, from the proceeds of a tax-exempt financing. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Boonville, Missouri as follows. The City Council hereby declares its intent to finance the costs of the project. The city has made or expects to make expenditures in connection with the project. The city may reimburse itself for such expenditures with the proceeds of a tax-exempt financing by or on behalf of the city. The maximum principal amount of the tax-exempt financing expected to be issued for the project is $4 million. Passed this 22nd day of August 2017 by the City Council of the City of Boonville, Missouri.
Morris?
I'll make a motion this be approved.
Good, do I hear a second? Second. Thank you, Susan.
I got this from our bond council. This has to do with the, sort of the second phase of financing on the soccer that we're doing with First State. Remember, we went through that a couple of months ago. We haven't done the documents on that yet. Hopefully, they're pretty close. It's more for, as I said, the second phase of financing. The work we're doing now comes out of the COP that we've already issued, and so we're eligible to use that money. Since we haven't done the documents, we passed this primarily because of the land item that's coming up here. I'm not sure how I want to pay for that, but I may want to push that into this financing, and this gives me the ability to do that or anything else that might come up between now and whenever we do the documents. So,
Questions for Earl? Okay. Roll call.
Stock,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Beach,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Venable,
Yes.
Dorman.
Yes. Okay, moving on to new business, item A, first and second reading of bill number 2017-026.
An ordinance of the City of Boonville, Missouri approving the purchase of Tract 2A, reference survey number 2015-3135, located at 1730 West Ashley Road, and authorizing the city administrator to take such additional actions as are necessary to procure to complete the purchase. Whereas the council and city administrator have discussed acquisition of the above referenced property in order to secure the perimeter of the soccer fields at the high school and make room for improvements to the soccer complex. And the council authorized the making of a formal offer to purchase said property for $115,000 at its August 7th, 2017 meeting. And whereas James Brent and Jolene D. Hodges, hereinafter the Hodges, have agreed to sell and convey this certain property to the city of Boonville, and whereas the city and the Hodges have entered into a contract for the sale of said 1.54 acre tract, more or less, at the above described location, and are scheduled to close this transaction on August 31st, 2017. Now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Boonville, Missouri as follows. Section 1, that the contract for purchase of a 1.54 acre tract of real property located at 1730 West Ashley Road for $115,000 is hereby approved by the City Council of Boonville as described in the contract for sale of real estate, which is attached hereto and marked as Exhibit A. Exhibit A is incorporated herein by reference as if set forth fully in this ordinance. Section 2. The city administrator is hereby authorized to take such additional actions as are necessary and proper for the city to complete the purchase of this real estate as is fully legally described in the contract at Exhibit A and in accordance with its terms, so that the city may take title to the property upon and from the date of closing. Section 3. This ordinance shall take effect and be in full force from and after its passage and approval, first and second reading, August 22nd, 2017, read for the second time and passed on this 22nd day of August 2017, after a copy of this ordinance and the attachment have been available for public inspection prior to passage.
Second reading, title only.
An ordinance of the City of Boonville, Missouri, approving the purchase of Tract 2A, reference survey number 2015-3135, located at 1730 West Ashley Road, and authorizing the city administrator to take such additional actions as are necessary and proper to complete the purchase.
I'd entertain a motion. Anybody want to make a motion?
I move to approve this.
Thank you, Ned. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Thanks, Vanessa. Any questions or comments? Roll call.
Stock,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Beach,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Venable,
Yes.
Dorman.
Yes. Excuse me. Reports of standing committees. Public Works, Susan.
That meeting was canceled because of Black Forum.
Okay. Street and Alley, Mike.
I believe it was canceled.
Okay. Planning and Zoning, Whitney.
It was canceled due to no new requests or applications.
Okay, thank you. Housing Authority, Morris.
We had a good meeting.
They always meet,
always.
don't they? Yeah.
No, like always, and everything Everything's in good shape.
Okay, very good. Police board, Henry?
We did meet, and if there's any questions, I can answer them, hopefully.
Okay. Looks like you hired some new officers.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Do that.
any questions for Henry or the chief? IDA and MFA, Steve?
Not to take any of Jim's thunder, I'm just gonna tell you the minutes are in here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Parks and Recreation Board, Vanessa?
I did go to that meeting. We had some discussion about bags that they want the public to be able to rent from the city. If they have like a family reunion, and we went back and forth about it and finally decided to do some more research to find out how other cities have done this, because we didn't know how to go about it. Talked about the pool, and they seem to have made the same amount of money as they did last year, or a little bit more, but attendance was down, so they think maybe concession stand, and they didn't have final numbers, but Paul said he would have them. Had a solar eclipse report, and we also discussed the golf course and some criticisms people have been hearing about it. So Paul was going to go take a look at that and help us figure out what, if anything, to do about it. So.
Okay. Any questions for Vanessa? No? Okay. Well, we'll move along to reports of city officials. City Administrator Earl.
Okay, I sent you a separate little packet in your regular packet this week. As I noted in my memo, I won't repeat all of that, but back when we finished up the budget, I noted there was some ideas that had kind of come forth that probably merited some discussion as the year unfolded, and this meeting seemed like a good candidate to consider these as the budget cycle's not here yet, but it's getting here and so forth. So we got about 9 items on there that I just wanted to run through. Some of them are more or less ripe, and some of them are more just for information items. So I guess the number 1 and 2 sort of fit together. And if you just sort of look at the memo I wrote, the intent of all this is sort of to try to, I don't know how you want to describe it, but to plug some leaks or to claw back some of our revenue deterioration, if you will. It seems like any revenue you look at on our general fund has forces working against it, whether it be internet sales being the most prominent for the sales tax, that's in spite of the use tax, or cheap natural gas prices, or energy conservation, or low interest rates, or the gas tax obviously has no growth to it whatsoever that we get a chunk of from the state. And you can just look up and down, like I said, the property tax grew at 0.7%. Well, that doesn't pay for much of a health insurance increase or whatever each year. So these are just some ideas. Most of them, frankly, aren't that significant. But anyway, so number 1 and 2 will kind of go together. I believe Carissa sent you some information here about the cable one, which was sort of a new idea that she came up with, and maybe it applies a little bit to the second one also, in terms of the loss that we get from like landline telephone lines and dish TV and whatever else comes on the horizon. So I'll let Carissa talk a little bit about the background on the cable one and see where we go.
Okay, thanks, Earl. Our gross receipts tax on the other utilities that Earl mentioned hover around 5%, between 4 and 5%. And so cable has been lagging for some time. As you know, we only have one provider, and that was a function of the old franchise system where cities were responsible for giving those franchises out and basically could franchise one provider. That authority has since been given to the state, and the Public Service Commission is now responsible for administering that franchise and collecting those gross receipts or authorizing the continued collection of gross receipts. 2007 is when the state took over all the authority for regulating cable companies in the state. They ratified our 2% on the gross receipts, but we had to keep it at 2% until the contract or the franchise that we had given to Suddenlink, or the predecessor to Suddenlink, expired, which was in 2013. So we are now ripe pursuant to that passage of time and under this 2007 Cable Provider Act to increase up to 5%. The only requirement that we had to meet as a city was to advise the cable company, any cable providers that were doing business in the city, which is only Suddenlink at the present time, and give them 90 days notice that we intended to raise it, and we can, like I said, we can go up to 5%, and we are authorized to increase once per calendar year till we reach the upper limit. I have put them on notice. I sent a certified letter in July, or perhaps the end of June, saying that we intended to do this up to 4% total on the gross receipts for this year. So we do have that authority now to go ahead, or we will have after the expiration of 90 days to go ahead and do that. But in looking at the ordinance that you passed, or that was passed by this body in 2007, in conjunction with that Cable Franchise Act passed by the General Assembly, you put the city put that 2% cap on gross receipts at that time, and made that specific to cable, which was appropriate at the time. But now, with the advancement of new technologies, I think that there is a way, and I've provided a partial example of how we can do that, to revise that cable franchise tax bill to include other forms of technology. And it's tied to the ability of the city to regulate its own right-of-ways, its own rights-of-way for public utilities. We already do that. We have right-of-way fees that the city charges in order to for utility companies to come in and disturb those rights-of-way. So we already know when new services are coming in that may use those areas. So we can put them on notice once the right-of-way is breached and new utility facilities are put in the right-of-way that signal to us that other providers are in the area and providing services, or may be providing services to end users in the city, that we can put them on notice that we collect this 4% gross receipts. So I think that this puts us in a position, once this proposed ordinance is completed, it puts us in a position to monitor those rights-of-way, to identify who's coming in, and to let them know that we do capture this 4% on video services, data transmission, and other types of new technology, new ways of getting information off the internet and into people's homes. And we can start collecting that on the end users within the city. So that's what this draft ordinance is the beginning of. The other part of it that ML and I are going to work on is tightening up the regulations on the right-of-way restrictions, because the General Assembly so far has still left the city with the authority to regulate what goes on in our rights-of-way. So unless and until they take that away, we still have the ability to control who goes in, what they can put there, how they maintain it, and there are some new technologies coming I heard at the Missouri Municipal Attorneys Association meeting this summer that there's now a 5th generation 5G cells that are going in that are providing sort of shorter range transmissions of data around. So we still have some authority to regulate those. They still want to make it part of the planning and zoning process to see what's going in, where it's going in, and sort of what it looks like so that it doesn't completely overtake the looks, the aesthetics of our rights of way and our streets ultimately. So that's it on that piece of the revenue enhancement package.
Two questions. The goal is both to increase the rate and to pick up computer,
Yes.
because we don't get text, or we don't get it, the opportunity to text on those. And you keep saying 4%, we're sitting at 2% now?
Yes.
This is the second question. We increase that by 1% per year to get to the 4%, or we can go right from where we are now to the 4% plus pick up the digital?
We're not limited, and we're only capped at 5%. We're not limited to what increments we can use to get there. And we don't necessarily have to go to 4%. It was just, Earl and I had talked about, sort of what was appropriate, and we thought it was best to, shoot high, advise them that there was a potential that we were gonna go up to 4%, but we may decide, or he may decide, that a more incremental approach is preferable in the short run.
Okay. Does this affect DISH at all? No. Do we get anything off of DISH?
We do not.
Not as far as franchise tax goes,
Okay.
because they're not in the right of way.
It's kind of what I thought, but I just wanted,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, that's part of the attrition to the base.
Is this a tax that the end user pays or the company pay?
The cable companies under the Cable Services Provider Act in 2007 were authorized to pass it on to consumers. So it is a line item on the bill, and nothing has changed that. So it
That's on the
currently,
bill now.
yeah, it
Yeah.
currently is taken that way, and it will continue to be charged out that way.
As are all the other franchise taxes.
Any tax.
You can find those on your bill too.
Even if it's.
Right.
One thing I would note in the context of franchise taxes is that some places have a franchise tax on water if they have a private water company. We don't do that, so. So any other comments on that? I think it's an important thing to try to shore up our revenue base, because the decline in that source has been surprising to me over the last couple of years. You combine the landline and the electricity and the natural gas and all that, man, I think I put a number in there, it's over $100,000, and that's hard to deal with going in our state of affairs, so.
Just in the past year, Earl, it's over 100,000.
In the last couple of years, I
Last
don't want to pin myself on one
No,
year,
I-
but yeah, pretty darn recently, yes. So absent any objection to that, when Carissa gets that to a right point, we'll bring that back forth for formal consideration. Good. Next item on the list is building permit fees. I just looked up, remember, some of you were around then, I think, when we last raised them. I think it was in 2007. And so that's 10 years ago, so we might take a look at them. And again, none of this is big money. I think we might bring in $15,000 to $17,000 in that a year. But that's probably something worthy of revisiting again. I don't think we're in any danger of outpricing the regional market in terms of our building fees, so.
What's your goal there, Earl? I couldn't tell from.
I don't have a goal.
Okay.
on that. We just feel our way through it a little bit, and whatever we get, we get. It's
Well,
not gonna be much.
yeah,
You know,
no,
we're
you're
talking
right.
about
I
$3,000 or
mean, you look
$4,000
at-
a year probably, so,
You look at Sedalia, Marshall, and Columbia,
yeah.
you're looking at much bigger numbers than what we're doing.
I expect they do, yeah. Yeah, they may have a little more building activity than we do too, but, you know, so. The next item is a property tax. This is sort of a, for information only item. This is back to the 70 cents I referred to you before. Our limit is $1, and you used to be able to do that without any kind of vote, but that got, compromised or limited over the years to where to go above that 73-cent number I voiced, you have to have a public vote. But nonetheless, it's sitting there available for general revenue purposes. The next item is a similar thing, except it's for sales taxes. Obviously, we have used that. Everybody has used that, and see now people are, you know, you read the Columbia paper and they're kind of, their administration has posed the idea of returning focus to the property tax versus the sales tax, in spite of they're gonna put the use tax on, but there's still some other sales taxes out there that we don't utilize. Most of them are sort of a specific one. There's one for, the most prominent one is for transportation, which would be streets and roads, and I think it's signage and striping of streets and so forth. There's one for economic development, I think, for cities. A couple of them, you have to form a little side commission or side body, which kind of dilutes your authority and is somewhat problematic. And I think there's one newer one that apparently appeared on the scene this year, sort of unbeknownst to anybody, that's an addition for the general sales tax, which is the oldest sales tax that the city's had. We passed it way before any of us were active here. And it formerly had a 1% ceiling on it, and now has a 2% ceiling on it. All those have to go to a vote of the people, and the good thing about that particular tax is it's just for general governmental purposes. So if you have the sales tax, the next two items kind of come into play. The next item is you have vendors in town who don't necessarily pay their sales tax, and so what should our response be to that? We've not been overly aggressive with that over the years. Sent out a couple of letters. Carissa, she's sent out some letters, a little more forceful since she's arrived and had had some success. But she's going to address a couple of points here on this. Some of it we're sort of obligated to do, and some of it's probably simply the right thing to do, since you have one business that does the same thing as another one, and one of them's paying, the other one's not. That doesn't seem fair, so anyway.
Okay. I passed out a recent copy of amendment to section 144.083 of the Missouri statutes, which was put into effect in 2007. And basically the blue highlighted language is the new language that came along in 2007 that requires a city, even though it's not in our city ordinances, the state law requires that we have a letter of no tax due, indicating that all of our businesses in the city who have sales tax licenses and sell products at retail and services at retail are collecting sales tax. The point of sale transaction, they collect sales tax for the city, but it all goes on a return, and it all gets paid over to the Department of Revenue, and then given back to the city according to our rate. So it's a long process. It requires a lot of detailed paperwork on the part of the businesses to keep it up. So in order for us to issue a business license to anybody doing business in the city, we have to have that no tax due letter. Brenda gets those off the internet from the Department of Revenue. So we know that everybody who gets an occupational license, a business license in the city, is paid on their sales tax and their withholdings for income tax, state income tax. There are situations, and there's an example in the materials, where there'll be somebody who has a state sales tax license, but for whatever reason, they have ceased to be current on their collection of, and return filing on those taxes to the state. So there, in a lot of these cases, their business model then becomes dependent upon collecting all of the money and giving none of it back to the cities, or the other taxing jurisdictions that get a piece of those sales tax revenues, because they're not paying sales tax. So we have been in a position with a couple of those entities where we have given the city business license in good faith on this no tax due letter, and then find out later that they've been revoked, that they quit paying their sales tax and they continue to do business. So it messes up the playing field, because we have all these other businesses in the city that have got their occupational license, they're doing business, they're collecting our sales tax revenue, sends it back to us, and it works like it should. Unfortunately, we have a few that we've already issued the business license to, and they continue generating revenue, just not paying the taxes. So something we have struggled with is, what do we as the city do when we know this is going on? How, what's our authority, what's our responsibility for leveling the playing field? Or do we have a responsibility? Or we just wait till Department of Revenue, till that end of the paperwork catches up and they come to us, or fail to come to us to renew the business license, and we discover that they have a back balance due with the Department of Revenue. We have some authority. The police have the authority to go in and see if the business license is current and they're complying with all the city ordinances, which would include being current on sales tax, or at least having a valid sales tax license. So that can happen. The city clerk has the authority to go in and shut the doors. But the question is, as the legislative body and sort of the policy-making body, is that the will of this council for us to be that overt about it? We're pretty good, between Brenda and I, are pretty good about making sure that everyone that owes us a business license renewal gets it into us this year. And that's another area where the city generates revenue, because we issue the business licenses, or Brenda does, based on gross receipts for the year. So whatever the projected earnings are for the business, it's a sliding scale system for collection of a license fee. So that's another revenue generating aspect of this thing. So we've gotten something out of them if they've renewed the business license. It's just that, the other part of it is the duty to collect and pay back the sales tax.
Vanessa?
That can't go on longer than a year, right? Not paying sales tax.
Right, because the next time, December 31st, I believe, is when all the business licenses expire for the city, and they have till February to renew. So that's when Brenda would do her check.
Oh, no, they have to pay their state sales tax, or they can't keep doing business.
It takes a while, though. Sometimes there's a lag, and the Department of Revenue does not have, they don't have people on the ground who visit communities to see if these people are doing business. They canceled the sales tax license, the state does, but in terms of being able to go out and lock up doors or exercise any authority on the ground, they just don't have it. So it's kind of up to us, maybe, to be the enforcement mechanism. Or there's criminal prosecution, and that we've seen that actually occur. One instance in particular with a city vendor. we didn't have anything to do with it. Mind you, this was,
So you have,
state
you
prosecutor.
have the fraud opportunity at the front where they charge for the sales tax, but they don't reimburse the state. So that's a fraud opportunity, correct?
It could be a criminal matter. The state prosecutor would have to pursue it.
Okay, so from our standpoint, what's the trigger? Where could we revoke their license? There's gotta be a trigger for us to be able to do that, right?
That they wouldn't be in compliance with our ordinances, which require them to pay us.
Okay, so the only time that we really check to see that they're paying the state is when we do the licensing, right?
Yes.
So you'd have once a year where you could pull the trigger and revoke their business license in Boonville. And then if they continue to do business, what action could we take?
And that was what I was saying
That's
about
our
the,
question.
yeah, about the,
How hard do you want us to push that point?
Well, if I'm a merchant in town and I got a guy or gal next door to me that's not
Yeah.
paying sales tax, I want him revoked now. Because that's not fair. That's not right.
It kind of makes sense, but once you do it, you may get some pushback here and there. And you may
And
not.
if we don't do it, then we're
Then
telling them
we
it's
should get
okay.
pushback then. Yeah, I agree. So we're just putting it on the table. So,
But is there a trigger? Is there a point where we can pull the trigger that we can define? I think that's my question, Chris. I get confused with the conversation as to when we could go in and slap.
and it's cyclical. So we're not all operating on the same cycle. So sometimes we'll get a revocation notice. I think it's quarterly that the businesses do their returns. So if somebody's gonna get revoked, there are potentially 4 times a year when we get a notice of revocation for failure to do the returns and pay the taxes, so.
And we have access to that information.
Oh, yeah,
They send it to us.
Department of Revenue lets us
There's-
know.
There's a sample in here.
Yes,
Yeah.
there is.
Page
Sample.
8.
Yeah, page 8. So yeah, you either
Yeah, I
get
saw
that
that.
periodically during the year, or when we renew them, we look to see if they have that no tax due. And if they can't produce that, then we don't issue the license. So that's the trigger annually.
And then if they try to do business without a Boonville license, we can shut their door. That's Teresa's job.
Yes. We send her out with the club.
I've seen her angry
And her
once or
husband.
twice, and I don't want to be there.
So how does everybody feel? Do you feel this is something that we should pursue, or do you want to kind of sit back?
It's not like this is dozens and dozens of folks, but
No.
it's, there's a few, sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's just very small.
And is it actually hundreds of thousands of dollars, or?
No, it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So, I'd say we should pursue it if,
Well, you get 4 trigger points a year, on
Yeah.
quarterly, so if it happens, we should pursue it.
The other part of the sales tax discussion that we wanted to have with you, I talked about the sliding scale, just as an aside, I talked about the sliding scale. Page 11 of your materials is the schedule of merchant license fees, and you can see there the breakdown of what we charge for what level of gross receipts on the merchant side. I thought that might be interesting information, and it's, that is also something that could potentially be on the table as a revenue enhancement, kind of like the building permit issue Earl spoke about before. This ordinance is how it's currently codified, this Article 1, Section 10. These are pages that are currently in the ordinance book, and I've added, after some discussion in City Hall about how we're doing so much tourism type stuff now, and we're starting to see more festivals crop up and more vendors on scene, and some concern about whether or not we were capturing any sales tax from the transactions that were occurring as a result of that. We started to kick around the idea of an itinerant vendor license, so that rather than worry about whether these vendors, who frankly have a lot of other things to do because they're traveling around to all these festivals and shows, whether they did a specific piece of paper that would allow them to put a meager return on it so that the money might come back to Boonville, we would just issue an itinerant merchant license for them to come in and do business in the city on a temporary basis. And in that way, we would sort of capture some revenue without worrying about, because typically there's a brick and mortar somewhere, there's a home office somewhere, and that's probably more than likely where the sales tax returns are being completed, and where it's more likely that any sales tax due is being paid. It's pretty
So that
unlikely.
community would get the sales tax.
Correct.
It was actually earned here.
Yes. And you know, if you look at it on an individual basis, it's not gonna be that much, but over a period of a year, when we have festivals and different vendors coming in, it can add up. So if we just issued itinerant vendor licenses, much like we do for our regular business licenses, on a one-time basis, and said, if you're gonna be doing business in the city for 7 days or 10 days in a calendar year, come on in, but we need to have you get this itinerant vendor license. That would be a way of doing that. And based on a code that I saw from another jurisdiction, an idea that Kate and I talked about, and she seemed to think that might work here, is we could do itinerant vendor licenses for maybe 3 or 4 vendors that were coming in, but if it were a larger festival, something on a recurring basis, like Peddler's Jamboree, where we'd have the Chamber of Commerce or some other organizer having, soliciting vendors and sort of keeping track of who was coming in and assigning tent space or something like that, then that entity might be responsible, and they could get what we might term a marketer's permit, and then they would be responsible for the itinerant vendors, but there would just be one overall marketer fee that would be charged to the organizer, so that we wouldn't have to worry about all the different little vendors who were in there. And this wouldn't absolve anybody from the responsibility of touching base with the health department and making sure that they had all those bases covered, but it would allow the city to recapture some revenue from those transactions.
And it would actually sort of level the playing field with brick and mortar businesses that we have here, because that's, as long as I can remember, that is an argument with restaurateurs. You know, we do a festival and then you have people come in and selling food, and here these people are set up and licensed and food handlers and et cetera, and they're competing with people who are not paying any taxes or fees or
Right.
anything. It's something that needs to be done to protect our businesses.
Yeah, because occasionally they set up a temporary stand or something somewhere, and the guy next to them is selling popcorn or hot dogs or whatever, and,
Right.
you know, I think there's some way that the sales tax could get back to here, but it's almost impossible to make it happen, let alone for us to follow through on it. So this idea is much better. I compliment the 2 ladies for coming up with the idea. It's much better, and the amounts in there, because any one little vendor is not going to generate a whole lot of sales tax. So I think we're more than compensated for it, and then we don't worry about the sales tax at all. And if it's a local person that already has a license, then they don't need to get this.
So the yellow highlighted part was the itinerant merchant and temporary market permits section. I put the cigarette tax material in there with a red note talking about the change that occurred and about how that's collected, but we are one of the few municipalities that still have a cigarette tax, because that was cut off by the legislature some time ago. And then the other thing that needs to be cleaned up is this Article 3, the merchants and manufacturers inventory tax. That has not been something that we can collect. It's been replaced, so that needs to come out. So there are other good and valid reasons for opening up this particular ordinance and doing some cleanup to it. That's it.
Okay, we'll pursue that also then. All right, number 8, again, Chris wrote you a memo on this. Basically, a little bit of background. Once upon a time, and for better or worse, I can remember that time. The city used to collect their own property taxes, and I guess it was around 1980, probably, when that happened. And somewhere around that period, a trend happened, not just here but everywhere, that they started just letting the county collect all the political subdivision taxes. But the county's not obligated to collect our taxes. Consequently, there's usually a payment involved, and that's basically what the memo is all about. And she's given you several comparables in here, and I think the thrust of her argument is valid. I think somewhere over the years, the division of labor or something at the county, or our understanding of it has changed and so forth, and there are certain offices that are no longer involved in the collection of property tax that may or may not have been done. And then the states added some little fees for what they call assessment fees that are required now too. So I think we need to pursue that and re-engage with the county and probably get it down to a more normalized level.
This is what's on 29, right? Page
Yes.
29.
Yes, yeah, that memo there, yes.
So how much money are we talking about at 4%?
Oh, I think I budget of near 40,000. That's the existing number, right? That's our current number, 4%, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the budget's around 40,000 for the expense.
Got it.
So we can save money. And there's also a statutory obligation that we need to be contributing to the assessment fund. And so getting a new agreement in place will accomplish that.
Just a quick question on this. There's a mention in here that the county clerk gets paid 1.5%. Does that money go to the county clerk, or does that go to his office, or what is that?
Under the contract, it goes into the county general fund, and they collect the withholdings and paid out in salary.
Okay, so that's paid to the county clerk.
Mhm.
Oh, well.
That's a 30-year-old contract. It needs to be revisited.
Yeah. Okay.
Commissions are perfectly appropriate. That's how lots of smaller jurisdictions get their taxes collected. It's just a question of what agreements between what officials constitute an appropriate commission system for the
Well,
collection
there
of
ought to
those
be
taxes.
something done for the commission.
And the other thing that we don't currently have, that I would like to see us have on the next contract, is the collector to agree, and it's up to her, but lots of county collectors do this, collect the special assessments. So the grass cutting, the rubbish remediation, things of that nature, where we issue a special tax bill, would just go on the regular property tax as a first lien, and eventually could lead to a tax sale and foreclosure if not paid by the property owner. We currently just collect that. It's catch as catch can, but it would be nice for that to be
Yes.
a lien on property and be counted toward a delinquency.
Good thought.
Okay, I think we're probably gonna initiate some movement on that pretty quickly. So, the last item there is the Housing Authority pilot waiver, and I just give you a little worksheet on that, on what the amount was. And again, that's not nearly ours, so I'm not talking about much money here, either, because we don't get all that $5,700. I assume it would be split up as the total taxes are. I'm not sure what the protocol is on it, but it's just some food for thought. I mean, they generate expenses just like anybody else does in terms of the public services that are required. And, you know, I think whenever this whole idea of public housing was instituted a long time ago, the whole reason that there's a pilot in there was somebody thought it would be appropriate to pay it, and then the trend got to be that everybody waives it. And I don't know if that ought to be an assumption.
The backside difficulty of that is the property tax helps to pay for the maintenance of the facilities that the city provides.
Yeah.
I mean, we still have to take care of the streets, we still gotta take
Yeah,
care of the
yeah.
sewers, we still gotta take care of the water. We were doing that for 50 pieces of housing here for $5,800 a year. Now, in 1 year, there might not be anything, but when those street, sewer, and water
Yeah.
expenses hit, they're big. They're
Yeah,
expensive.
yeah, we've done significant work on Wind Drive over there, so.
And, you know, I think that's probably one of the things that the public is not aware of.
I think
is
that's
the-
probably
Is
true.
the backside property tax effect of public housing. You know, including what's, you know, down there off of South Main. It's substantial.
Yeah, but again, that 5,000 is not all ours. Because the county writes them the same letter I have been writing them about the waiver, so that's,
Somebody probably you wrote in their split.
I did, I wrote that in there, so it's not all, it's not, that's why I say it isn't a lot of money, but we're almost at the point where it's thankful to find a $2,000 increase rather than a $2,000 decrease when I'm looking at the budget, so. Anyway.
Well, and we don't have much control over that. Isn't that state or federal legislation?
What, the waiver?
The-
No, we have control over it because I'm requested to write it each year. I believe as a member of that board, you got an email last year because I was, in someone's eyes, tardy in writing the letter. So,
I remember that, but I didn't realize it was this.
that's what it is.
Holy smokes.
All right, well, I think that was a good discussion, and we'll proceed on most of the items. So,
Could we just, real quick,
sure.
because maybe I missed it or didn't hear it, did we talk about the gas situation when we're talking about gas as fuel, diesel, or natural gas? This is on 26 and 27.
Which one is it?
It's the tax imposed on gas.
Oh, that's one of yours. Gasoline tax, yeah. Well, I guess we can do that. You mentioned it to me. A city gasoline tax.
Yeah, Earl mentioned that there were, I don't know where, you were looking at the material though, 26 and 27?
26,
Yeah, and
fourth of the way
it's
down.
probably not fair, but it's one of the things that you pick up when you travel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go, like, in New York State where folks live, and then you go 30 miles up the road to Rochester, New York, the gas prices are like 30 cents difference.
Hmm.
And it turns out that what that is that's a community tax difference, where the community is coming in and taxing the fuel. Like the towns that are close to St. Louis, they keep spreading out farther and farther and hitting those for income. And is this something with which we have flexibility? Or is this a state statute that covers this?
We have constitutional authority to have a gas tax. There's only one other city, one other municipality in the state of Missouri that currently does it. But it is something that is out there. It requires a vote of the people. But it has some potential here, especially with the way that our city is laid out. And
Exactly.
what tends to gather on the connection points with Highway 70.
Right. Well, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah,
So it seems to me that it is a potential, it's an
It's,
opportunity.
yeah, you'd guess 1 cent a gallon to bring in
Oh,
some
my
money.
gosh, yes.
Be more than $2,000.
I bet it
Yeah.
will. I bet it will.
Good. You might put that on your list. I think that's worth talking about. Don't give me that look.
Call it the Ned Beach gas tax.
Yeah.
We have stuff to pay for, so we're gonna do a Net Beach gas tax.
All right, thank you, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Earl, and thank you, Carissa and Kate, for the information that you provided. Mayor, I have nothing. City Councilor?
Nothing.
Okay. Dr. Jim Gann?
Well, in deference to Councilman Young, I'm not sure I have any thunder to bring you. He didn't want to take any of mine.
No.
My report is on page 32. I don't have a lot to report on, other than the IDA and MFA are working on a housing summit, which you saw reported in yesterday's Boonville Daily News. That planning for that is continuing, and we're also trying to get information about the community's broadband and what is going on that may be relevant to your taxing conversation after we report back to you what we find out. We have had some Missouri partnership activities this past month, although none of the requests that were made, we didn't have any qualifying properties or buildings available. On the locally sourced side of things, we've had quite a bit of interactions, but again, nothing big to note. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
Quick question with Kenny's and yours, focus on the housing and all of that. I think that's really good. I'm glad y'all are doing that. I'd like to make sure that on your list you get two things, because when we did Lake Farrell, the real key to making that happen was MHDC, Jim. And you know, everybody's probably familiar with the regular kind of programs that MHDC has, but they also do some very imaginative stuff. And that, you know, like, that might open up the rehab, it might open up the infill type opportunities where we can get some good, reasonably placed housing. And we could use a lot of rehab in the older areas to rehab those houses so they can be sold and be used.
So just to interrupt on that point, or respond to that point, so I don't think the IDA or the MFA is at the point of even coming up with a strategy yet. At this point, what they intend to do is to get really the stakeholders of housing together in a room to understand what are the factors that are impacting housing construction in Boonville and rehab. But what's affecting, you know, so we've heard that the housing costs before you start a home in Columbia are significantly higher than here. Well, how does that affect the profitability of a builder here? If our houses here sell at a lesser price on average than Columbia, how does that affect a builder? So I don't know that, you know, I hope it's encompassing enough to give you as a legislative body the ability to maybe influence some of that through policy decisions. But anyway, we're trying to approach it with an open mind, and at this point, we're just trying to understand what are the factors.
Right.
So.
Yep, good. As long as MHDC is on there, they're a financing factor.
Right.
So if they're on there, you know, I think you'll get some good information out of that. I think this is something that needs to be looked at. You know, I mean, even starting with the dirt and looking at the codes all the way through. So I was glad to see it.
Sure.
That it was on That was it.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. City Clerk, Teresa?
I just want to remind the city council that the next meeting will be on Tuesday, September the 5th, due to the Labor Day holiday.
Okay, another Tuesday meeting, okay. Miscellaneous, anybody have any miscellaneous?
I have one, the letter that you got from the cable company.
Altice?
Well, it was kind of interesting. Does anybody know if the service people are still gonna be here in Boonville? I think
I
there's
believe
two
so,
people.
yeah.
There are two people. Okay, so basically just the office is covered. And because they can dispatch off of the phones and off of the
I think
computers
the
when we
office
call.
maybe hadn't really been open too much anyway, from what I,
Yeah,
from some letters we received about that.
yes, yeah,
So, yeah, there'll still be service people in the area.
okay. That was all.
We had service and they didn't do a very good job, and it's still out pretty much, but this guy came from Oklahoma.
Seriously.
Yeah.
He was probably working a whole bunch up here.
He's what?
Working a whole line up here, probably covering for somebody.
I don't know. We've had him twice and our phones still just stop working sometimes.
Your phone's on suddenly?
I've got
Mike.
something. As everybody knows, Monday was the eclipse. Had several people come up, and I think Vanessa might have been standing with us also, but everybody at home needs to know how hard everybody, city employee-wise, worked, and officials. We got a lot of compliments. I was standing with a couple of the guys, city workers, and we got people came up and just were very appreciative of everything they've done. Everybody, the town, everybody said everything was clean, it looked great. I think everybody had a great time, even though the numbers weren't as big as we thought they were gonna be. I think everybody was spread out a lot. There was a lot more people here than I think we all thought also. So kudos to everybody that worked, because I know they worked all weekend. That's a lot of time away from families and all that, so it was a good turnout for just that, to get that hoorah.
Yes,
Yep.
went very well, and special kudos to Kate Fiel and Katie Gibson, who were sort of the head honchos and coordinated the whole thing, and there were lots of others. And yes, the employees should be thanked for all they do. I know one person, his little girl's birthday was over that weekend, and he just took her out and put her on the gator, and she helped him do stuff, and probably had a ball, actually. So it was a thing where everybody pitched in where they had to, and I didn't hear too much complaining. Maybe Kate and Katie did, but I didn't hear much complaining at all, so that says something about our employees, I think. Any other miscellaneous? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.